So before we continue with today's sermon, I just would like to invite you to begin with a simple noticing right now, just for one moment. Just be aware of your thoughts. Not the content of your thoughts, but the fact that you are aware of them. And you'll know and you'll see, we all know it, that there is a voice inside your head. It comments, it judges, it shares all the time. So today we're going to explore something both simple and revolutionary. And it's this: you and I are not the voice inside our heads. Let me say that again. You and I are not the voice inside our heads. If you pause for just a moment, you'll notice something quite remarkable. There is a voice, as I said, commenting, narrating, judging, remembering, planning. And it says things like, oh, I should have said that differently. Or, why are they looking at me like that? Or, oh my goodness, what if this goes wrong? And as we know, that voice is incessant and it chatters and it worries and it replays and replays. And most of us, most of the time, we believe that that voice is us. But what if that's not true? What if that voice is something that's not us, but something that we experience, rather than something that we are? And this is one of the central insights into the untethered soul. There is a difference between the voice in your head and the awareness that notices that voice. And noticing that difference is where freedom begins. So try this right now. Notice your thoughts just for a moment and just observe them. And now ask yourself, who is noticing these thoughts? There's a quiet presence, aware, steady, and unchanging. Thoughts, as we know, they come and they go, emotions rise and fall, but this awareness remains. And in the UU world, we don't insist on there being one name for this presence. Some might call it the soul, some might call it spirit, some might call it consciousness, some might even call it the witness. Whatever name we choose for it, it's the part of us that is capable of stepping back and saying, oh, wait, that's just a thought. Or, oh, that's just a feeling. And in that moment, something shifts. And as Michael teaches in his book, we are no longer trapped. So much of our suffering comes from being what he calls tethered. You could, of course, say something like hooked or attached to every thought and emotion that arises. Someone criticizes us and we carry it for days. A memory surfaces and we relive it as if it were happening now, again. A fear suddenly manifests and appears, and we build a whole story around it that affects our future. An old hurt or a painful memory is triggered and we get spun out. And so we don't just experience life, Michael, in his book, teaches us that actually what we're doing, if we allow ourselves to, is we gripping it. And in gripping it, he teaches us that actually we're losing our freedom. And he describes this so beautifully. He says that we build an inner world of preferences, projections, and fears. And then we spend our lives trying to make reality match our inner world. And we say things like, well, I need this to happen so that I can feel okay. Or I don't want this to happen so that I can feel safe, for example. And slowly and quietly, we do what he says, we get tethered, we almost imprison ourselves. And it's not a prison of walls, it's, as Michael says, a prison of attachments. So the invitation of the untethered soul is not to control life better. Rather, it's to let go of the need to control it. Now, this, of course, can sound frightening or unrealistic or perhaps overwhelming because we think things such as, well, wait, if I let this go, won't everything fall apart? But consider this. The heart beats, the seasons turn, people come and people go, joy and sorrow arrive in our lives completely uninvited very often. So the question is not whether life will change. The question, as Michael says throughout his book, is whether we will meet it with resistance or with openness. And I do want to stress here, and Michael does throughout the book, that letting go does not mean passivity. It just means that we stop clinging. And it means that we allow life to move through us rather than trying to hold on to it or control it. So let me offer you a simple image. Imagine that you're holding onto a branch in a flowing river. And the water is pulling and pushing you, and you're holding onto this branch so tightly. And after a while, of course, your hand and your arms begin to ache and your body is straining, and you think, ah, I must hold on or I will be swept away. But Michael challenges us to reframe this. What if the river is not our enemy? What if the river is actually life itself? And what if letting go does not mean drowning, but rather floating? And most of us, Michael argues, are exhausted, not because life is too hard, but because we're gripping it too tightly. I want to share a very brief story with you, and I do think that some of you are familiar with this story. So, but just enable for me for a moment to share it very quickly. It's a Zen Buddhist story. And it goes like this. One day, an older Zen monk and his younger apprentice monk are traveling together, and they come to a river. And the river has a very strong, obvious current. And as they are preparing to cross the river, they see a young lady in distress. And she also is attempting to cross the river. So the older monk offers and says, would you like me to carry you across the river? And she says yes. He carries her across safely, and on reaching the other side, he places her down gently, and she says, thank you very much. goodbye, and she goes on her way. The two monks continue on their journey for more than half a day. And finally, towards the end of that day, the younger man could not contain himself any longer. Sorry, the younger monk. And he blurts out, I thought that we monks were supposed to avoid women. Why did you do that? Oh, says the older monk. You mean the woman way back there? Oh no, I put her down a long time ago. But it seems that you might still be carrying her. So I think the question that this raises for all of us perhaps is, okay, so how do we begin? Where do we begin? And Michael teaches that it's not by forcing the mind to be quiet, and it's not by suppressing our thoughts or our emotions. It's just by building the muscle of what he calls observing, being a witness. That when a thought arises, we train ourselves to notice it. And when a feeling arises, we allow it. And that way we become curious rather than reactive. We say things such as, ah, there's anxiety again, or, uh-oh, there's anger, or, ah, this is a joy. We are aware of it, we experience it, and then we let it pass. And so this is not detachment or indifference. It is rather presence without possession. In other words, being fully here in the moment, but not entangled in it. And one of the most radical teachings of the Untethered Soul is this. Our freedom does not depend on external circumstances, not on whether people approve of us, like us, not on whether life gives us according to the plan. That's a big one for me. I'm often finding myself saying, but wait, this was not the plan. And not on whether everything feels comfortable. Freedom, Michael reminds us, comes from our relationship to our inner world. It's interesting because as we know, especially as the older that we get, that two people can experience exactly the same event, but it's possible that one of us could become trapped in it, whereas some allow the experience to just move through them and then remain open. And that's the clincher, is remaining open. And what makes the difference? Well, of course, as Michael says, it's not the event itself, but the degree of attachment that we have to it. And so here is where the teaching becomes deeply spiritual. Because when we're no longer consumed by what I would like to think of as our inner turbulence, something opens. And we become more available to love and to grace and to peace. And it's the kind of love that doesn't cling and doesn't need to control, but it's the kind of love that simply allows. So think, and I speak to myself here, but think of how often fear shapes our relationships. And we might hold back because we fear rejection. We might grasp onto something because we fear loss. We might try to manage others because we fear uncertainty. We get triggered and it can sometimes impact our connection to others. But what would love look like if it were not driven by fear? And that's the crux of this book. What would it feel like to say, I love you? Not because I need you and I need you to make me feel safe, but because love is what flows freely from my open heart. This, Michael says, is the love of an untethered soul. Now, I do want to be honest and say that this path, as all of us know, is not easy, because staying open means, of course, that we have to feel everything. Joy, yes. Peace, yes. But also at times grief, disappointment, vulnerability. But here's the paradox. And Michael talks a lot about this, that when we resist pain, it stays. And when we allow it, it moves. Think about that. The untethered soul is not one that avoids suffering, but it's just one that doesn't hold onto it. And in that letting go, there is, Michael assures us, a quiet, resilient joy. So I offer you a simple practice, and I offer this, of course, to myself too, that throughout your day, let's start today, throughout your day, notice when something disturbs your peace. Could be a comment, a delay, someone's reaction, what someone's doing, a worry that you have. And just pause and take a breath and ask yourself, can I let this pass through me instead of holding on to it? And the good news is you don't have to force anything. You just have to notice the impulse that all of us have to stay attached to it, or to use Michael's words, to cling to it. And the argument is that the more we do this, the more we're able to soften it again and again and again. So this practice is not asking for perfection, and it's certainly not promising us constant calm, but it is inviting us into a gentle returning, a returning that will help us gradually loosen the tether and learn to let go. So the deeper invitation is this, that ultimately this teaching is inviting us into a profound shift in our identity. And we begin to see, if we grow this muscle of observing, we begin to see that we are not, as I said earlier, we are not our thoughts, and we are not our fears. And most importantly, we are not our stories. Rather, as Michael reminds us, we are the awareness in which all of these things arise. And from that place, life can become less about managing and more about experiencing. Less about control and more about trust. Less about holding on and more about learning how to be open, more and more and more. So I want to leave you with this question. What would it feel like to live just a little less tethered? What would it feel like to loosen our grip on the past? What would it feel like to soften our resistance to what is happening right now in this moment? And finally, what would it feel like to release our fear of the future? And of course, None of us know, even Michael, that this is not something that we can do all at once. It's a gradual thing. But even just the smallest of spaces between us and our thoughts can ultimately become the doorway to freedom.
If you like this video, please like us on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and click on the bell to be notified whenever we post a new video. Thank you.